Lucy.
Hello, Rob. How are you?
I'm fabulous, thank you. How are you?
I'm really good.
Another It's All Virtual.
Another It's All Virtual podcast.
I know, this is an exciting one, right?
Mm-hmm. It's our first guest.
And who is the guest today?
James Blevins.
He's a really cool dude.
And all the way out in LA.
Right? We know people.
Hello and welcome to our podcast, James. Please, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, thanks very much for having me. I know it's late where you are. My name's James Blevins. I've got about 15 years in VFX, a place like Cinesight, Digital Main, DreamQuest, 7 years in the Disney Digital Studio, about 5 years at Netflix when there was only 350 of us. And by the time I left after 5 years, it was a behemoth. And left there to go get back into production. I was post-production supervisor on The Mandalorian. I'm also a member of the board of directors for something called the Hollywood Professional Association, which we have a wonderful tech retreat every February. A member of the Science Technology Committee of the American Television Academy of Arts and Science. I am a co-founder of a company called Mesh with my partner, Ben Baker. We do a lot of good work all around the world, the planet. I'm also a member of Starting Pixel, which is a fabulous place to meet people. But that's me in a nutshell.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you very much. I've been watching you for a long time. You bring people together, right? And not many people do that. And it's really appreciated. I can't tell you just the Starting Pixel stuff. Even when I'm really tired, when we talk about something that is just so interesting and everyone jumps in and exchanges ideas and they're not kidding around. They're all people trying to get things done. And it's a great community you've made. And I really appreciate it. So there, kudos.
Well, thank you. It was born out of necessity, really. Unlike you, I've only been doing this for 3.5 years. So it's like, how do I learn stuff? I know what I do. I'll see if I can. I'm going to create a community and I will learn all from them. People come to me directly and ask me questions. You're like, ask the community because someone's going to know. And I have this sort of opinion that doesn't matter how long you've been doing it, there's a really good chance that you'll know something that somebody else doesn't because it's moving so quickly.
That's interesting about your group is a lot of them are in the trenches, right? There are a lot of lurkers, of course, but there are people in the trenches and that it's a great sort of indication globally of how everything is moving so fast, right? Digital doubles is evolving, right? And oh, wait, what about tracking data? Oh, wait, what about depth data? What are you trying to use? Oh, which version? It's just everyone is trying to save the other from having a bad time. And that's what we really need to have happen in virtual production. We have to be very careful of moving forward is that it is a bit of the Wild West, but we do need to protect our colleagues from introducing a bad time to virtual production because anything we can do to avoid the adoption rate problem.
What's your thought on the problems with the adoption?
We see something which is very interesting, very useful, and when pulled off correctly, just does an amazing job. That doesn't really translate into the schedules and budgets of very successful people who are looking at us and going, oh, that's nice, but how does that fit into what I'm doing? And so that we do have a legacy issue. A couple of things are happening. The unreal of it all is expanding a bit. The evolution of 2.5D as a possibility in a lot of our workflows has been a great stepping off point. And you know who doesn't have any trouble at all getting a line item paid for in virtual production? The process shot guys, the car people. You know, that's no problem. I've even seen a line item that's like technical green screen. And so the accountant was like, green screen. Yeah, whatever. I know what that is. Sure, go do your green screen, right? And then, of course, it's an LED wall, and it is a technical green screen. You can turn it green if you like, and people do. It also does this other thing, drive plates and do 2.5D. So I think with those sort of innovations and the fact that, and we'll talk about Project Arena a little bit too from Chaos, that is taking direct from Maya and Max, going straight from V-Ray scene files to a projection system. Now we get VFX, their workforce getting into the game, as well as I think that the process shop people are taking the tech and expanding out as well, right? They're becoming not just car process people. They also say, oh, well, we can do your pickups for you if you like, and bit by bit. I think people are getting used to the tech, getting more comfortable with the tech. Clint Spillers told me this was going to happen. He said people will say, I've got $30 million. Is virtual production good for my movie? And thankfully, we're a little farther ahead. People don't ask that level of question anymore because, of course, the response is, how the heck would I know unless I read your script? So I think the adoption problem is it's just not happening fast enough for our liking, but it's being adopted more and more because it's just way more efficient for certain types of shows. It's so much more efficient. And we know now exactly how it compares to, say, set extensions or green screen copying for 20 pages of dialogue, 200 shots of dialogue. We know the sweet spots now for how a particular scene, how long it would have to be in order to get the point of diminishing returns for visual effects. The calculations that we do, the conversations we have, we know how much it's going to cost for a set extension. That means that even for some of your most expensive assets, if you shoot 60 shots, you spent the same amount of money, right? So those calculations are starting to happening. They're happening at Amazon. Amazon is leaning into virtual production. Apple, I think it's show by show, case by case. I think that the episodic television situation is also going to forge certain types of shows will love it. I don't know. That's what I see. What do you see in terms of the adoption?
It's still early days, right? I've always said virtual production be like a 5-year overnight success. It will absolutely suddenly be upon us and it will be a thing. It seems to be, we're sort of in year 4 at the moment, which is a bit worrying because it doesn't feel like it's long enough along that curve.
I agree. But we did have a writer's strike on our side of the pond, which messed us up quite a bit. We were going gangbusters. My company, Mesh, my partner, Ben Baker, and I were on the Daily Show. Virtual production for us is not just about LED walls. It is, for the most part, about integrating effects through proper lens profiling and camera tracking. That's virtual production. And we were really making headway, and then suddenly we had to come to a screeching halt.
It's quite challenging in the UK, certainly for the creative industries are having a real problem at the moment. To your point, how's it going? It feels as if we are behind the curve, to be honest with you. And that might be a cultural thing. One of the reasons why Lucy is great for this show is that she brings that young producer kind of, okay, tell me about the tech side of things. People who are trying to make these decisions have a really difficult time grasping what on a virtual production is and the complexities of those numbers you talked about. There's a huge amount of trust as well goes into.
I'll tell you, that's kind of where we need to be, is a trusted partner in the production process. So production people will have, they'll get the band back together, right? They'll call all the old crew from a show, and that's because they've continued to work, and they're trusted partners. We need to be that for our production teams, a trusted partner. And that does take some time. You have to be part of a particular traveling circus. It's challenging because a lot of this is almost facilities based, right? It's interesting. We have really come up to the point now where the long tail of VFX work, certain companies are going to have to decide how much they want to take on for virtual production because it will impact the long tail of their visual effects.
Blockbuster is a great example of people who sit on a technology thinking that nothing will ever change, and then suddenly everything changes, and they're sitting around twiddling their thumbs.
Oh, it happens. And
right? The shocking thing is that history has gone through these loops time and time again.
There's a lot going on at the moment in terms of change. Do you know the story of the Luddites? Yeah. If you wanted handmade lace stockings, there was only one way to go, and it was somewhere in England. The company invented an automatic lace stocking machine, and it just worked. And was it as good as handmade? Probably not. And there was a little bit of a rebellion. General Ludd would write to the newspaper editorials about how this was a travesty and this, blah, blah, blah. The story doesn't end well for the Luddites. They just basically said, stop. And of course, they didn't. So it's a cautionary tale. It's terrible what happened to the Luddites. When I hear people talking about no AI, which, by the way, is Virtual production is machine learned adjacent, right? We're using a lot of machine learning. My company gets a lot of calls, not just about virtual production, but about production pipeline stuff, which is all being it's all getting intertwined. So my point is, you have to pivot and you have to adapt. And I know that you appreciate this, both of you appreciate this. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing what you are doing, where you are doing it, at the edge of production technology. You do have to remain open to it.
My history is working for the likes of Microsoft and Salesforce and other big tech companies, and they were constantly looking to innovate. If you weren't doing it, your competitors are going to be doing it. And then suddenly you're just not getting the 30% growth that you need to be getting.
Yeah, I agree. And also, if you don't open yourself up to the possibility of change, then you're too busy railing at the establishment for making the decisions they've made, instead of leading the charge by being informed on what processes. Right. You might miss the boat. You really might. It's something we talk about internally. Ben and I talk about this all the time. I'm way more pro-technologically. I love the evolution of technology. Always have. I'm constantly readjusting the conversation to, this is not a threat to artists. I posit this question to him, and I posit it to you too. If an artist chose to use these tools, would you begrudge them?
Not at all.
I think it's a good time to hear from a sponsor.
The Motis Star Tracker is one of, if not the best, camera tracking systems available. The whole unit sits with the camera, it's millimeter accurate, and with the VP Pro software, which integrates with Unreal Engine directly, it really brings shots to life.
Head over to the Motis' website where you'll be able to find case studies and full specifications.
If an artist chose to use these tools, would you begrudge them?
Not at all. I heard a discussion about Edgar Wright, and he learned his skill when film turned to video. That just opened a huge box, an opportunity for him to learn the skill that was really inaccessible for other people, because it was not a cheap thing to own a film camera and then buy the film and then edit and develop the film and edit the film. It was a very, very costly thing. Whereas video came along and then suddenly you could just video all day long. And this went to digital, and as we go into AI, if anything, it just makes it more accessible. And then I think the interesting thing is that new formats and new ways of telling stories come out, and new ways of entertaining people, right? I mean, that's what it's down to, especially when that linear TV is going to be challenged. It's not suddenly going to increase in viewership exponentially over the next X number of years. Same with AAA film. It's not going to exponentially grow, but the volume of content is going to constantly hockey stick. Right. My hypothesis is that it will come from the likes of the new Mr. Beasts of the world who haven't matured yet. Right. And that's where new ideas and grasping the sort of technology to tell their stories will be.
You guys are amazing.
I think lots of people are very stuck in their ways. And I think that's where a lot of the fear comes from. Now, podcasts are vodcasts because of the content, because social media and everything, they need those snippets and those reels to create their audience. People are now wanting to listen to those podcasts, but also, I'm going to search, I'm going to find a video of what they're talking about so that you can see the facial expressions, so you can see if they're holding something up.
There was the Diary of the CEO? Yeah, the Diary of the CEO. So it was really interesting. He's hired someone to do trailers for it. Like really, really good trailers, because it's driving content, right?
So there's a company called 12 Labs, and I'm an advisor for a company called FBRC, pronounced Fabric. They're an incubator here in Los Angeles, specifically targeting machine learning AI products, trying to get into M&E, trying to separate the wheat from the chaff. And the 12 Labs opened up the API during an hackathon at FBRC, and this was basically vectorizing video. Gives you a sort of a percentage chance of successful response. And, turns out we can do this pretty well in language. If you take 12 Labs approach and you analyze the entire sports library, for example, which is what they did, you can go into that once it's done. You can say, show me all the interviews with Tiger Woods talking about his backswing. And it will just bring them up just like that. Show me all of the pieces of mascots doing backflips. Just like that. Unbelievable. Right. So the winner of the hackathon did very well, took the 12 Labs vectorization and then associated it with the automatic translation technology. And so they found a little snippet of Tiger Woods talking about Backswing, and then they had a little drop down and said which language. They put it into German, and not only just changed the same intonation, changed it into him speaking German, and rendered the mouth. Just
Wow.
Yeah.
Right.
I watched a video on that. It's insane.
so we're very close to your man saying, oh, he said that they've hired a trailer department. 12 Labs and that approach of vectorizing video, you can have probably an assistant, a virtual assistant, making your trailers for you pretty quickly here. Less than a year. That's going to pop up.
The really interesting cultural part of that is the fact that for a non-English speaking audience, they will not have to put up with badly dubbed films anymore. They will be able to watch Top Gun 3 and they will see Tom Cruise talking in German.
Yes, there's two problems with your model there. One is everyone already knows what Tom Cruise sounds like when he speaks German because there's an actor who was cast for that job, right? So that it'll be weird if he has a different voice. And someone else, the German actor who does Tom Cruise suddenly is not part of the picture. However, they could take his voice, right, and then go ahead and use that automatically. Yeah. Also, there are now services being shown up at places like Deluxe, and there are lots of other. There's a race going on for this kind of work, and the thing that they're racing against is proper emotional response. Today, you can go into Google, YouTube, and you can get this podcast translated into many different languages just using Google, and it would come off a bit monotone. Great for advertisements, great for interviews, great for selling products, that kind of thing. On the far end of the spectrum, the most expensive services is, yes, you have someone who's actually directing each line. Yes, that is angry German, but not the right kind of angry. Actually, the 4 angry, automated pieces that I have, I'm picking this one. The ratio for that was 300 to 1. 300 to 1. They had spent 300 minutes to make 1 minute that way.
Right.
However, that's been cut by a fifth at this point. So it's coming. Right? So it's coming, and God help them, because the people who've been doing the dubbing, they will need to find other things to do.
There aren't that many farriers as there used to be. There aren't as many typewriter engineers as there used to be. I don't know if you heard the theme tune that someone created for Starting Pixel. It's hilarious, but it's killed that kind of incidental music. It's stone dead.
I would send my son's little songs that I had written in 2 minutes, boy, I'm tired of your lies, time to take out the trash or die. It was really great. You could just make up a whole song. What was it? Put away the dishes or else. It was actually a pretty good song. This is the world we're living in, is impulsive artistic creation.
Right.
I think the things that are happening specifically in virtual production, now you'll see Audi. I don't know if you saw Audi running around Cinegear. Disguise is a great company. They're just still expensive, but they're also very good at what they do. Audi is sort of their front man there, really knows a lot. He was over at Cinegear talking about Virtual Production 2.0, which I believe is this. It's Avatar was Virtual Production 1.0, Mando was Virtual Production 2.0, and now we're talking about Virtual Production 3.0. And so what is Virtual Production 3.0? It is certainly more camera-oriented than anything else we've been doing. I mean, really just leaning into the digital doubles of cameras. And I think we've all seen now these recent posts about camera lens. Really need to emulate not just the mechanics of the lens, but the actual you need to emulate the lens, right? Yeah. You need to emulate the light bouncing around in there and blossoming and blooming and getting a little dirty and all that stuff. That has to be emulated properly, because we're moving into a world where we don't care about whether or not we're in a virtual world or in the real world. We don't care whether or not it's real and what isn't. We want a seamless integration down to less than half a pixel. And that's happening right now. There's high frequency depth data that's going to be captured by wherever the camera is looking. This will help in that we will know where everything that's real is, and we'll know it in reference to a digital world. And so again, we're moving into this world where we don't really care what we shoot and what we digitize, what we create. It matters less. We can do what is most efficient. And then on top of that, I think finally it's the integration of like your setup right there with the green screen, we don't care if it's an LED wall or not, because what we really want is DMX lighting actually to light the foreground and get away from this whole like, well, LEDs don't create full spectrum light. Well, that's fine. There are plenty of things that do. And
absolutely.
we did in our set, we were very good at making light. And so we're just going to go ahead and get over that little bump in the road that was the lack of full spectrum light problem. And we're going to lean into maybe compositing post-camera, on-the-fly effects. We're not going to care whether or not we're using green screen or LED walls. It's not going to be hard. It's going to be repeatable, sustainable, and it'll be something that just sort of a production can do. It'll be expertise that is mastered. I think in about, 2 years, it'll be just sort of like another set piece,
Yeah. That is very indicative of new technology in itself. When the iPhone came out, everyone was over the moon. And you remember the days when people used to queue outside at midnight when Microsoft was going to launch a new operating system. But days later, it's just accepted as that's just the thing, And the iPhone's really only been very good for the last few years, up until 5G came along and good cameras. But now, it's brilliant. And that's one of the challenges with virtual production or film tech. It's not just about camera tracking or performance tracking, but it's this amalgamation of the vast number of small amounts of tech that are being introduced into that pipeline.
I think every single implementation is going to be a little bit different for the foreseeable future. I really am interested in the additional workflow of not having necessarily to go to Unreal, which is great. And if you have to do a lot of particles and that sort of thing and certain particular types of animation, then you should definitely lean into Unreal. Project Arena out of Chaos, they're extracting V-Ray scene files out of Enscape, out of Houdini, out of Maya, out of Max, and they're handing them to the stage and they're just going. That's going to bring a whole lot of more people, production designers, maybe even art department closer to
Yeah. And I think for all of the things that it's done to create this new methodology, Unreal Engine, it's still an incredibly big beast that does a relatively simple thing for VP. To your point, VP 2.0 was a massive hack. It was a point of time. Actually, I was talking to Chris Bouchard, and he was talking about the hack that came along because of COVID. It was just a bunch of tech being thrown together to sort of fix some problems, whereas actually,
so good,
the maturity of it.
He's so good at blending 3D and 2D aspects into his work. Really good. And I think that's something we should all look at Chris's work a little bit, because he's, he'll do this beautiful sort of 3D elements, background and foreground, but in the midground, he slipped in ocean waves. You know what I mean? Because let me just slip that in there. And so he's really good at compositing virtual production stuff. I like his work.
Thank you so much again, James.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
It's been great to chat.
Please, individually or whatever, if you have any questions or anything like that, just reach out. I'm around.
Thank you so much, James.
Thank you.
You take care.
Bye. That was such a good conversation that we had with James.
He is a font of everything.
Yeah, he's like, I was bamboozled by everything.
And I love the fact that he loves starting pixels.
No.
Which is very exciting.
#1 fan.
He's, I think he's definitely, we like him, for sure. What did you think of him?
Yeah, I thought he was really lovely. He had a lot to say about everything. When he was kind of talking about how people are needing to adapt, that really stood out because of that kind of whole idea of trust, and the whole idea of the virtual production pool then needs to be this one main thing that people can use it as a tool.
Absolutely. And it has to be a lot easier.
Yeah.
And it has to work. And then we will get adoption, like any technology as well. So that was really good. I think he's interesting about, actually, it's not going to be all about Unreal Engine in the future. I think that's really important. Mm-hmm. I think we have this sort of tie to Unreal Engine, but there are going to be other tools out there that maybe be as good as, or if not better, than Unreal Engine going forward as well. And, he talked about, it's not really about whether or not you use green screen. It's not really about whether or not you use LED walls. It's going to be about what you can do with the technology, with the camera tracking, motion tracking as well.
And then our last thing.
Yeah.
About virtual production 3.0.
Yeah, I mean, that's the key, right? It's like trying to get everything in camera. It's brilliant.
Amazing.
Well, thank you.
Thanks so much for listening, and don't forget to like and subscribe.
Bye.
Jazz hands.
Yes, Hannah.